Mom, I need you to take care of Christmas dinner this year. Sarah's voice was light over the phone, as if she were suggesting a quick errand, not a monumental task. It'll be 15 people from Mark's family, and you know how wonderfully you cook. Eleanor Vance, 72 years old, felt the world slow to a crawl. 72 years of life, 45 years of marriage, 30 years a widow, and now this. 15 people, Sarah? And why am I expected to manage everything? Eleanor's grip on the phone tightened, her knuckles pale. She heard her daughter sigh with impatience, the sound of a spoiled child not getting her way. Oh, Mom, because you have the time. Mark and I are swamped with work. Besides, his place is too small for his whole family. Yours is ideal, that big dining room, the spacious kitchen. And let's be honest, nobody makes a turkey like you do. Eleanor closed her eyes, leaning her forehead against the cool kitchen wall. This was the same kitchen where she had prepared countless meals for a young Sarah, where she had waited up, worrying, for a teenage daughter to come home, where she had wept silently after her husband's funeral. It was as if her daughter had forgotten their roles entirely. Sarah, sweetheart, I am not a caterer. I am your mother. Please, Mom, don't be dramatic. It's one family dinner. You can purchase everything and I'll pay you back later. Mark has already spoken with his mother, Brenda. She's handling the desserts. You just need to manage the main course, the sides, the appetizers, and tidy the house before and after. You know, the usual. The usual. A bitter laugh threatened to escape Eleanor's throat. When had it become normal for her to be treated as the family's domestic staff? When had she accepted being seen as someone whose time, energy, and self-respect were worthless? And, Mom, one more thing. Mark's family has certain dietary preferences. Nothing too spicy. Aunt Carol is gluten-free. Cousin Matthew is vegetarian. And Mark's grandmother only eats meat that's very well done. Oh, and we'll need red wine, but nothing too pricey. It adds up. Eleanor stayed silent, each of Sarah's words feeling like a stinging slap. This wasn't about a single dinner. It was a lifetime of small indignities, accumulating like raindrops until they formed a flood. And what will you be doing, Sarah, while I'm cooking for your husband's entire family? Oh, Mom, I'll be there to help, of course. I don't know, set the table and pour the drinks. Mark will be busy entertaining his family. You understand how these things are. Something deep within Eleanor's chest fractured. Not her heart, but something more fundamental, her patience, her endless capacity to agree, her need to be the perfect, uncomplaining mother. For 72 years, she had been the woman who fixed everything, who adapted to everything, who smiled even as her world crumbled. Sarah, I have a question for you. When was the last time Mark and his family invited me to anything? When was the last time they treated me as the future grandmother of their children and not as unpaid help? Mom, don't start that. They appreciate you immensely. It's just, well, you know how Mark can be. He's reserved. Reserved. Mark, who had never been too reserved to ask for a loan when his car needed repairs. Mark, who never hesitated to let Eleanor pick up the check when they dined out. Mark, who was perfectly comfortable using her home as a free guest house for his visiting parents. All right, Sarah. I understand perfectly. Eleanor's voice had shifted. It no longer held the soft, accommodating tone of a mother. It was cool, measured, and unfamiliar. Sarah seemed to notice, her own tone turning sweeter, more manipulative. So that's a yes, Mom? I promise it will be a lovely Christmas, and everyone will remember what an incredible cook you are. Eleanor gazed out her kitchen window at the garden she had nurtured for decades, the roses she'd planted when Sarah was small, the rusty swing where she had pushed a granddaughter who now lived far away and rarely called. Her world had shrunk to being merely useful to others. Sarah, my love, I have some news for you. Your husband and his relatives are welcome to celebrate Christmas. Perfect. Then I will be going on a trip, and you can manage everything, because I am not a babysitter, and I am certainly not an employee. The silence on the other end was absolute. Eleanor could almost hear the frantic whirring of her daughter's thoughts. She pictured Sarah's face paling, her eyes widening in horror at the prospect of organizing a dinner for 15 demanding people herself. What? Mom, you can't be serious. A trip? Where? With whom? Mom, this is absurd. Everything is already arranged. Everything was arranged by you, Sarah, without consulting me on whether I wished to be included in those plans. With trembling hands, Eleanor ended the call, staring at the receiver as if it were a foreign object. For the first time in decades, she had said no. For the first time in her life, she had drawn a line. The feeling was as terrifying as it was liberating. She walked slowly to her living room, where a lifetime of photographs watched from the shelves. There was Sarah at 5, in a pink polka-dot dress, grinning a toothless grin in the garden. There was her late husband, Robert, handsome and young in his military uniform, from a time before life had burdened them with bills, illness, and disappointment. There were photos of Sarah's first Christmases, when Eleanor still believed that motherhood was the only key to happiness. When had it all begun? When had she ceased being Eleanor, a woman with her own dreams, and become simply Sarah's mom? She remembered the day Robert died 30 years ago. Sarah was just 15, and Eleanor had vowed to herself that she would be both mother and father, that her daughter would want for nothing. She had kept that promise. She worked double shifts at the factory until her hands were rough and her shoulders stooped. She sold her wedding jewelry to pay for Sarah's tuition. She gave up any chance of new love because Sarah needed stability. She swallowed her loneliness for 30 years because her daughter was her entire world. When Sarah married Mark 5 years ago, Eleanor thought she might finally start living for herself, that her adult, established daughter would no longer require so much from her. How naive she had been. The first request came 2 months after the wedding. Mom, could you lend us $2,000 for the down payment on Mark's car? We'll pay you back next month. That next month never arrived, but more requests did. Mom, could you house sit while we're on our belated honeymoon in Cancun? Mom, could you host Mark's parents when they visit? Our place is so cramped. And Eleanor always said yes, always smiled, was always available. She walked to her bedroom and opened the nightstand drawer where she kept her important papers. There, she found the notebook where she had meticulously recorded all family expenses for years. She did it not out of mistrust, but from the habit of a working woman who knew the value of a dollar. The numbers struck her like a physical blow. Over the last 5 years, she had spent more than $15,000 on Sarah and Mark. $15,000 from her pension, her life savings, the money she had set aside for her own future medical care. Mark's birthday dinner, $1,000. Sarah's car repair, $800. Christmas gifts for the whole family, $950. Plane tickets for Sarah and Mark to visit his parents, $600. Sarah's rent when Mark was between jobs, $1,200 for 3 months. And never, not once, had they asked how she was managing, if she needed anything, if she had enough for her medications, or to fix the leak in the roof she'd been ignoring for 2 years because Sarah's emergencies always came first. She sat on the edge of her bed and, for the first time in years, allowed herself to cry. They were not tears of sadness, but of rage. Rage at Sarah for taking her for granted. Rage at Mark for treating her like a servant. But most of all, a deep, burning rage at herself for allowing it to happen. The phone rang again. It was Sarah. Mom, please. You can't do this to me. I already told Mark you were cooking. He's invited his whole family. What am I supposed to do now? I don't even know how to cook for that many people. Learn, Eleanor replied with a calm she didn't recognize in herself. Mom, this is insane. Cancel this ridiculous trip. Where could you possibly go alone? With what money? Let's be practical. You can't just travel by yourself at your age. At her age. As if being 72 automatically rendered her an invalid who required permission to make decisions. As if being a grandmother meant she had forfeited the right to be a woman with her own desires. Sarah, I have sufficient funds to travel. The same funds I've been spending on you for years. What are you talking about? We never ask you for money. The lie was so blatant it made Eleanor feel sick. Had Sarah genuinely forgotten all the unpaid loans? Or had she simply decided they didn't count because they came from her mother? Sarah, I have every receipt, every record. Every cent I've spent on you over the last 5 years is documented. Silence. Then Sarah's voice, smaller and uncertain. Mom, that's different. We're family. Families help each other. You're absolutely right, my love. Families help each other. When was the last time you helped me? More silence. Eleanor knew Sarah was desperately searching her memory for some act of generosity toward her mother. She wouldn't find one because none existed. I'm always here for you, Mom. I call you all the time. You call me when you need something. There is a distinction. The truth hung heavily in the air between them. Eleanor stood and walked to the window, looking out at the street where she had lived for 40 years. The same street where she had raised Sarah, mourned Robert, and grown old waiting for someone to offer her the respect she deserved. Tomorrow, I am visiting the travel agency, she said finally. And you will need to sort this out on your own. That night, Eleanor couldn't sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the familiar sounds of her house, the hum of the aging refrigerator, the persistent drip from the unfixed bathroom faucet, the creak of old timbers settling with the years. At 3 a.m., she rose and went to the kitchen. She brewed a cup of chamomile tea, the same kind she used to make for Sarah after a nightmare. The irony was not lost on her. Now she was the one haunted. But her nightmares had names: ingratitude, emotional manipulation, the crushing feeling of having wasted 30 years being the person everyone needed but no one truly valued. Sitting at the kitchen table with her steaming cup, she allowed herself to remember. Not the sweet memories she cherished, but the painful ones she had buried because they hurt too much. She remembered the first time Sarah had made her feel insignificant. It was 3 years ago at a neighbor's baby shower. Sarah had arrived late, as usual, and when someone complimented Eleanor on her new dress, Sarah had said, "Oh yes, Mom bought a new outfit. I hope she didn't overspend." You know how the elderly can be with money. The elderly. As if her 72 years of experience managing a household and a budget meant nothing. She remembered the first time Mark had eaten at her house. She had cooked for hours, chicken and green sauce, saffron rice, refried beans, handmade tortillas, 3 types of salsa. Mark ate without looking up, never offering a thank you or "this is delicious." Finally, he burped loudly and said, "It's all right. But my mom, Brenda, she uses more chili in hers." And Sarah had laughed. Her own daughter had laughed. She remembered all the Christmases she had cooked for 10, 12, 15 of Mark's family while they sat in her living room, watching television and criticizing everything. The house was too cold, the music too loud, the decorations too plain. And Sarah never defended her. Never. She remembered the day she had to go to the emergency room after cutting her hand deeply while preparing for Mark's birthday. Sarah arrived 2 hours later, not because she was busy, but because she'd been at the salon. "Oh, Mom, was all that drama really necessary? They're just a few stitches." Just a few stitches, as if her mother's pain was always an inconvenience. She remembered selling Robert's engagement ring, the last valuable keepsake of her late husband, to loan Sarah $3,000 when Mark lost his job. Sarah promised repayment in 3 months. That was 2 years ago. She remembered being bedridden with the flu for a week, so ill she could barely stand. Sarah didn't visit once. Yet the very day she felt better, Sarah called to ask her to water their plants because they were going away for a romantic weekend. And she remembered, with painful clarity, the exact moment she had stopped being a person and become a function. It was at the funeral of Aunt Helen, Robert's sister. Eleanor had been weeping, missing her dear sister-in-law and confidant. Sarah approached, not to comfort her, but to whisper, "Mom, you need to stop crying so much. People will think you're being dramatic. Also, I need you to go pick up my dress from the dry cleaners first thing tomorrow. I need you to go." Not, "Could you? Or would you mind?" Just, "I need you to go," as one would command an employee. Her tea had gone cold in her hands, but Eleanor didn't notice. She was too busy processing 30 years of small deaths, minor humiliations, moments where she had swallowed her dignity to keep the family peace. The phone rang again. It was 4 a.m. "Mom, are you awake? I can't sleep because of this. Mark is furious with me. He says, 'How are we going to handle dinner?' His parents have already bought their tickets. You can't do this to me. Sarah's voice was desperate, but Eleanor no longer felt the automatic, maternal urge to rescue her. For the first time, her daughter's problems sounded like problems her daughter had created and could therefore solve. Sarah, it's 4 in the morning. I know, but I just can't rest. Mom, please, let's be reasonable. We can find a solution. What if I pay for all the groceries? What if I help you more in the kitchen? As if the issue were the degree of help and not the fundamental fact that they had planned to use her home, her time, her energy, and her money without her consent. Sarah, the solution is quite simple. Host the dinner at your house. But our house is too small. Then rent a venue. That costs money. And my time, my home, and my labor are free, is that it? Silence. A long, heavy silence that held 30 years of unspoken truths. Mom, I don't know what's gotten into you lately. You're being so strange. So selfish. Selfish. The word every woman who dares to set a boundary hears sooner or later. The word designed to make women feel guilty for having needs. Sarah, I'm ending this call now. And do not call me again until you have found a solution that does not involve me. Mom. Eleanor hung up the phone and unplugged it from the wall. The silence that followed was the most beautiful sound she had heard in years. The next morning, Eleanor awoke with a strange sensation in her chest. At first, she thought it was anxiety, but after a moment, she identified it as something she hadn't felt in decades, freedom. For the first time in 30 years, she didn't have to wonder what Sarah needed, what problem required solving, what sacrifice she was expected to make. She dressed with care, choosing her favorite cream-colored blouse, the one Sarah always said made her look too old. She styled her hair in front of the mirror and, for the first time in years, truly looked at herself, not to find wrinkles or gray hairs to hide, but to recognize the person she saw. There stood Eleanor Vance, 72, widow, mother, but above all, a woman. She walked downtown with firm steps. Every block felt like a declaration of independence. The travel agency was on Main Street. Good morning. How can I assist you? The young woman behind the counter, Emily according to her name tag, had a genuine, welcoming smile. I'd like to book a trip for Christmas. How wonderful. Do you have a destination in mind? Are you traveling with family? I'm traveling alone, and I'd like to go as far from here as possible. Emily showed no surprise or pity. She simply opened her computer. We have some lovely packages for solo travelers. Are you interested in beaches, mountains, historic cities? Eleanor looked at the images. White sand beaches in Cancun, snow-capped Swiss Alps, cobblestone streets in Spain. For years, she had only seen these places in waiting room magazines, thinking they were dreams for other people, people who had a right to happiness. What's your budget? Emily asked gently. Eleanor thought of the $15,000 documented in her notebook. $15,000 she had given without a second thought, believing love was purchased with sacrifice. I have $5,000, she said. And as she said it, she realized it was the first time in years she was discussing her money, not funds reserved for Sarah's emergencies. Emily's smile widened. With $5,000, we can do something spectacular. How about a tour of Spain and Italy? 3 weeks visiting Madrid, Barcelona, Rome, and Florence. Historic hotels, meals included, English-speaking guides. It's perfect for someone looking to rediscover themselves. Rediscover herself. The phrase resonated deep in Eleanor's soul. I'm interested. When does it depart? We have a departure on December 20th. You'd return on January 10th. Perfectly timed for the Christmas holidays. The irony was so complete Eleanor nearly laughed. Do you need some time to think it over? No, Eleanor replied without hesitation. I'd like to book that trip now. As Emily prepared the documents, Eleanor felt a mix of terror and euphoria. It was the most impulsive decision of her life and also the most rational. For the first time, she was choosing her own happiness over the expectations of others. I'll need a copy of your passport and a credit card for the deposit, Emily said. Eleanor produced her passport from her purse. It was valid. She had renewed it last year with a secret hope. Sarah had mocked her. Why are you renewing your passport, Mom? It's not like you're going anywhere. To Spain and Italy, Eleanor thought with a smile. I'm going to Spain and Italy. When she left the agency with her ticket in hand, she felt like a new woman. It wasn't just the trip, it was what it symbolized, the decision to live for herself. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Mom, Mark says if you don't cancel this ridiculous trip, he'll tell his entire family you're selfish and ruined Christmas. Is that what you want? Eleanor read it twice. The first time with the old instinct of panic and guilt. The second time with a new, cold clarity. Mark, who had never held a job for more than 6 months straight, who had lived in her house rent-free for 3 months, who consumed her food and utilities, now had the audacity to call her selfish. She typed a clear reply. Tell Mark he is welcome to tell his family whatever he wishes. I'll be in Europe, so I won't hear it. The immediate response, Europe? Are you insane? With what money? With my money, Eleanor wrote. Then, after a moment's thought, she added, the same money I've spent on you over the years. The messages followed a pattern, anger, then emotional blackmail, then victimhood. It was like reading a manual on manipulation. The saddest part was that for years, that manual had worked perfectly on her. But no more. She called her friend Beatrice, B, the one person who had always been honest with her. Eleanor, where have you been? Sarah called me, hysterical. B, I need to tell you something, and I need your honesty. They met at their usual cafe. B, 74, was as direct as ever. You look different, B said. You look more like yourself. Eleanor told her everything. B listened without interrupting. And what do you think? Eleanor asked. Am I being selfish? B laughed, a sound like jingle bells. Oh, Eleanor, how many years have I waited for you to have this conversation with yourself? I've watched how Sarah treats you. And every time I tried to say something, you defended her. But she's my daughter, B. But she's having a hard time. Sound familiar? Eleanor flushed. Yes, it was familiar. B, do you think I'm a bad mother for taking a Christmas trip? I think you're a woman finally learning the difference between being a good mother and being a useful mother. A good mother teaches independence and gratitude. A useful mother does everything until her children forget how to do for themselves. The words were like rain on parched earth. Eleanor had been a useful mother, not a good one. But isn't a mother supposed to be available? Eleanor, Sarah is 33. She's a married woman with her own home. If she can't organize a dinner without her mother doing it all, that's not your failure. It's yours for never teaching her she could. The truth was simple and brutal. B, what if she never speaks to me again? Then you'll discover if she truly loves you, or if she only loves what you do for her. The truth was simple and terrible. For years, Eleanor had confused being necessary with being loved. Go to Europe, B said, taking her hand. Go and rediscover who you are when you're not someone's mom. The next day, Eleanor knew it was time for a final, face-to-face conversation. She couldn't leave with this war unresolved. She turned on her phone and called Sarah. Mom, finally. Mark says you probably hit your head and that's why you're acting so weird. Sarah, I need you to come to my house. We need to talk. Talk about canceling this trip and sorting out dinner like adults? Come at 3 p.m. And come alone. Alone? Why? Mark wants to talk to you. He says you need to understand the reality of the situation. Mark, the man who had explained reality to her from her own sofa, rent-free. Sarah, either you come alone or don't come at all. I'm not negotiating. Sarah arrived with the air of a petulant teenager, sitting on the sofa with her arms crossed. Mom, this has to stop. You're acting like a spoiled brat. The whole family is talking about you. What family, Sarah? Mark's family, who has never once invited me as a guest. The family that only knows me as the free cook and cleaner. That's not true. They appreciate you. When was the last time any of them asked how I was? Brought me a gift? Called just to chat? Sarah opened her mouth, but no sound came out. They both knew the answer, never. Sarah, for 5 years, I have been the unpaid domestic staff for your husband's family. And for 5 years, you have been fine with that. That's not true. We always treat you. How, Sarah? How have you treated me with respect? How have you valued my time? Eleanor retrieved her expense notebook and placed it on the table, open to the final tally. $15,000. This is what I've spent on you in 5 years. Money for my pension, my savings, the money for my own old age. Sarah stared at the numbers, wide-eyed. Mom, you kept track? You're right. You never asked me to. You also never asked my permission. You just assumed it was yours. But we're family. Families help each other. Tell me, Sarah, how have you helped me in 5 years? Silence. Profound, ticking clock silence. I'm always here when you need me. When have you needed me, Sarah? Give me one example. More silence. Sarah was desperately searching her memory. When you were sick. When I had the flu last year. You didn't come once. I found out you were at the spa with Mark's friends. I didn't realize you were that sick. I sent you 3 messages saying I was very ill. You never replied. Mom, you can't pick apart every little thing. They aren't little things, Sarah. They're 30 years of little things that have become this, a relationship where I give everything and you take everything. And the moment I set a boundary, I become the villain. Sarah began to cry, not genuine tears of remorse, but the manipulative tears that had always worked before. Mom, you can't leave for Christmas. You can't leave me alone with this. Sarah, you created this. You volunteered my home and my labor without asking. This is not my problem to solve. But I don't know what to do. I can't cook for that many people. Learn. Hire a caterer. Order pre-made food. There are 100 solutions that don't involve me. That costs money. And my work is free, is that it? Sarah wiped her tears, switching tactics. Mom, if you do this, Mark will be so angry with me. He says if his family feels unwelcome, it'll be my fault. Then perhaps it's time Mark learned to manage his own family gatherings instead of delegating them to his mother-in-law. You can't talk about my husband that way. I can and I will. Mark is a 35-year-old man who has never organized a family event because he's always had women do it for him. First his mother, now me. When will he grow up? Sarah stood up, furious. I see what this is. You're jealous because I'm not just yours anymore. You're jealous of Mark. The accusation was so absurd Eleanor almost laughed. Sarah, I'm not jealous of Mark. I'm tired of being his unpaid servant. You know what, Mom? Go on your stupid trip. We'll manage without you. And when you come back and you're lonely, don't come crying to me. Sarah stormed out, slamming the door so hard the house shook. Eleanor stood in the middle of her living room, breathing deeply. For the first time in 30 years, she had spoken her truth, and the world had not ended. The following days passed in a strange, peaceful calm. Eleanor felt no guilt, no remorse. Instead, she felt peace. She woke without anxiety, ate breakfast while reading the entire newspaper, took leisurely walks in the park. One afternoon, her doorbell rang. It wasn't Sarah. It was Brenda, Mark's mother. Eleanor, sorry for dropping by unannounced, but we need to talk. Of course, Brenda, come in. Brenda sat stiffly on the sofa. Eleanor, Sarah told me about your trip. I understand you want to travel, but isn't the timing rather poor? Our family has made plans. Brenda, may I ask you a question? In 5 years, how many times has your family invited me to an event as a guest? Brenda blinked, taken aback. Well, we've always appreciated you hosting. That's not what I asked. I asked how many times I've been invited to your home, to a restaurant, to a celebration where I was the guest of honor, not the staff. Silence stretched. Brenda looked at her hands. Eleanor, we always assumed you enjoyed being the hostess. Brenda, for 5 years, I have cooked, cleaned, and paid for your family's gatherings. And in 5 years, no one has genuinely thanked me. Last Christmas, your sister Carol criticized my turkey. Your brother-in-law complained about the beer selection. Your son burped at my table and fell asleep on my sofa while I washed dishes. Is that appreciation? Brenda flushed. She knew it was true. Eleanor, I hadn't realized. Of course you hadn't. For 5 years, you've all seen me as part of the scenery. The woman who cooks and cleans, but has no feelings of her own. That's not true. Brenda, what's my favorite color? What music do I enjoy? Do you know any of my hobbies or dreams that don't involve serving your family? Brenda looked at her with wide eyes, realizing she knew nothing about Eleanor as a person. What can we do to fix this? Nothing. You can't fix 5 years of disrespect with an apology. And I don't want you to. Christmas dinner can be at a restaurant, your house, or Sarah's. Anywhere but here. I know we've made mistakes, but cutting ties is so extreme. I'm not cutting ties. I'm setting boundaries. I am no longer your family's unpaid domestic worker. Brenda stood to leave, but turned at the door. May I ask you something personal? Of course. Were you ever happy doing all those things for us? The question hit Eleanor with surprising force. The answer was devastatingly honest. No, Brenda, I wasn't. I was so busy being useful, I forgot how to be happy. Brenda nodded slowly, as if understanding something profound. I hope you find that happiness on your trip. After Brenda left, Eleanor sat with her tea. For the first time, someone from Mark's family had acknowledged her right to happiness. It was a small step, but it was something. She looked at the calendar. 5 days until her flight. 5 days to leave behind 30 years of solving others' problems and begin living her own life. The phone rang. It was B. How are you, Eleanor? I think I'm finally learning the difference between being needed and being respected. And how does that feel? Eleanor smiled, a genuine smile that could be felt through the phone. It feels like freedom. The day before her flight, Eleanor woke with a childlike anticipation. Her suitcases were packed, her documents in order. But more importantly, she had rediscovered something she'd lost decades ago, hope. She dressed carefully, choosing the terracotta dress Sarah hated, applied her makeup not to conceal, but to celebrate. Every line on her face told a story, and for the first time, she was proud of that story. As she finished her coffee, the doorbell rang. Her heart leapt, thinking it might be Sarah. But when she opened the door, she found an elegant older gentleman holding a bouquet of flowers. Mrs. Eleanor Vance? Yes. My name is David Hawthorne. I'm Emily's father, the travel agent who arranged your trip. Emily told me about you. She said you were a brave woman traveling alone to Europe for the first time. I'm booked on the same tour, the same dates. I was wondering if you might like some company occasionally. Not for romance, he added quickly, seeing her surprise. Just someone to share a meal with, someone to take your photo in front of the Leaning Tower. It was so unexpected, so outside her vision of solitary independence, that Eleanor was speechless. I don't know what to say. I wasn't expecting this. Emily showed me your picture, not to intrude, he clarified, but because I'd mentioned hoping to meet interesting people. She said you had a smile that held both strength and sadness. That intrigued me. Eleanor truly looked at him. He was around 75, with silver hair and kind eyes. He radiated calm and respect. May I ask why you're traveling alone? My wife, Maria, passed 2 years ago from cancer. I promised her I wouldn't waste my days feeling sorry for myself. I promised I'd live for both of us. This is my first major trip without her. Eleanor felt an immediate connection. They were both escaping versions of themselves they had outgrown. And what do you hope to find in Europe? David smiled. I hope to find the man I was before I became only Maria's husband. I hope to remember what I enjoy when I'm not caring for someone else. His words resonated deeply with her. David, I have to be honest. This trip is very important to me. It's the first thing I've done entirely for myself in 30 years. I don't want to complicate it with expectations. Mrs. Eleanor, he interrupted gently, I don't want complications either. Just the possibility of intelligent conversation and someone to tell me if I have spinach in my teeth after pasta in Rome. Eleanor laughed, a genuine, unreserved laugh she hadn't heard from herself in years. You know what, David? I think I would like that company. Seriously? Seriously. But on one condition. We each pay our own way. No old-fashioned chivalry. I have my own money, and I intend to use it. David's smile widened. Mrs. Eleanor, I believe we are going to get along splendidly. He handed her the flowers, simple, beautiful daisies, and left after giving her his card with his hotel details in Madrid. After he left, Eleanor stood with the flowers, feeling like a teenager. Not because of romance, but because someone had seen an interesting woman in her. She placed the daisies in a vase on her kitchen table. Tomorrow, she would be on a plane to Madrid, and for the first time in decades, the future was a beautiful, exciting unknown. The phone rang. It was Sarah. Mom, you leave tomorrow, right? Yes, tomorrow. A long pause. Mom, I don't want you to leave angry with me. I'm not leaving angry, Sarah. I'm leaving free. Can we talk when you return? We can talk when you're ready to listen. Another pause. I love you, Mom. I love you too, Sarah. But I will no longer confuse love with unlimited availability. After hanging up, Eleanor made her last simple dinner at home. She ate slowly, savoring each bite, aware that tomorrow she would be dining in Madrid. For the first time in 30 years, she had a future that was entirely her own. 3 weeks later, Eleanor was sitting on a terrace overlooking the Mediterranean in Barcelona, a cup of café con leche at her elbow, writing in a new journal. Day 21 in Europe, she wrote. Today I understood something vital. Happiness is not a reward for years of sacrifice. It is a choice you make every day. David approached with 2 ice creams, lemon for her, chocolate for him. Over 3 weeks, they had developed an easy, comfortable friendship. They had explored museums together, gotten lost in Roman alleys, and shared laughter over his attempts to speak Italian. Writing your memoirs? He asked, sitting beside her. Writing my new story, she replied. The one that begins at 72. Her phone had buzzed throughout the trip with messages from Sarah, angry, desperate, manipulative. At first, she felt pangs of guilt. But she gradually developed a new perspective. Sarah's problems were no longer her emergencies. They were Sarah's lessons to learn. The most recent message was different. Mom, we had to cancel Christmas dinner. Mark and I fought about it. We realized we weren't ready to host something that big. His parents are disappointed with us, not with you. I think I'm starting to understand why you left. I hope you're well. Eleanor felt no triumph. Only a quiet confirmation that she had made the right choice. What are you thinking about? David asked. That for 70 years, I thought my value came from my usefulness. I thought love was earned by being indispensable. Now I know true love is unconditional. People who truly love you don't vanish when you stop being useful. David nodded. They had shared many deep conversations during their travels. Do you know what's the strangest thing? Eleanor said. I haven't cooked a single meal for anyone else on this trip, and I don't miss it. I thought I would, but I don't. What do you miss? I miss the woman I was before I became a function. The woman who read for pleasure, had opinions on films, dreamed of traveling. She was asleep for 30 years, but she wasn't dead. The sun began to set over the sea, painting the sky in nameless colors. Tomorrow was her last day in Europe. But home no longer felt like a prison. It was a place where she could continue being the woman she had rediscovered. David, can I confess something? Of course. When I was young, I wanted to be an art teacher. I never told anyone. It seemed a silly dream. After marriage, after Sarah, after Robert, there was always a reason to postpone it. Now, I think 72 is not too late to become who I always wanted to be. David smiled. You know, I have a confession too. I always wanted to learn the piano. Maria said we were too old for new things. What do you plan to do about your dream? I think I'm going to buy some paints. They laughed together, the laughter of 2 people who had discovered that life doesn't end at 70, that in some ways, it's just beginning. That night, Eleanor looked out her hotel window at the lights of Barcelona. Tomorrow, she would return home, but not as the woman who left. She would return as Eleanor Vance. She wrote in her journal, Today, I don't need permission to live. Today, I know that respect is not begged for, it is commanded. Today, I understand that freedom is not doing what you want, but refusing to do what you don't want. And tomorrow, when I land, I will begin the rest of my life. She closed the journal. For the first time in 72 years, the future belonged entirely to her. It wasn't revenge. It was liberation. And it felt exactly like flying. 6 months after returning from Europe, I am sitting in my new art studio, my hands stained with acrylic paint, my heart lighter than it has been in decades. I never imagined that at 73, I would be learning to mix colors and discovering a talent for landscapes. My house feels different now. It is my sanctuary. The silence no longer frightens me, it comforts me. Sarah and I speak, but differently. There were difficult conversations, but she is learning to relate to me as a person, not a resource. She asks about my day before listing her problems. She invites me to lunch and doesn't assume I'll pay. These are small but significant changes. Mark is still Mark, but he is no longer my concern. David visits weekly. We drink tea and share stories. He did buy a piano and is learning Chopin. We are two friends enjoying companionship without pressure. I don't know if it will become more, and for the first time, that uncertainty feels beautiful. I have learned that self-love isn't selfish, it is survival. I confused sacrifice with love, thinking the more I gave, the more I would be loved. Now I understand that true love allows both people to maintain their individuality. My savings have grown. I've used them to remodel my house, for art classes, for small luxuries, a monthly massage, new books, fresh flowers. Things that make every day a celebration. The most surprising discovery was that I wasn't invisible. I had simply stopped seeing myself. When I began to value myself, others did too. Setting boundaries doesn't destroy relationships. It either improves them or ends them. Both outcomes are good. The relationships that remain become authentic. Those that end weren't worth keeping. Some days, I feel sadness for the lost years, for the woman who believed she was indispensable when she was merely used. But that sadness no longer paralyzes me. I accept it, then let it go. The past taught me. The present belongs to me. I look at my hands as I write this. Hands that cooked thousands of meals for people who took them for granted. Hands that cleaned messes they didn't make. Hands that signed checks for others' dreams. Now, these same hands create art, write my own thoughts, applaud my own achievements. The woman who boarded that plane to Madrid was a retired helper who had forgotten her own name. The woman who returned is Eleanor Vance, artist, traveler, friend. A complete woman who needs no one's permission to exist. I still wake each morning not knowing what the day will bring. But now, that uncertainty is exciting, not frightening, because I have finally learned the most important lesson of all. I deserve to write my own story, and it is never, ever too late to change the ending.